So we are starting this week the third series, the third part of the series of the impact, the halachic impact that Rav Ovadia Yosef, Maran Rav Ovadia Yosef, Zechat Tzadik Kadosh Libracha, had on the Torah world in general and on the Sfaradim in particular. One of the big topics that Rav Ovadia Yosef really revolutionized the Sephardic world is the halacha of Bishul Akum. Maran says in Yoredea Siman Kuf Yud Gimel that Bishul Akum is not a the Bishul Akum is asur unless the Jew partakes actively in the cooking. The Rama is lenient that even if the Jew lights the fire and the goy cooks, it's also okay. Maran was posek that's not enough, and a Jew actually has to participate in the cooking. Now this created a huge issue in Eretz Yisrael and around the world. Whenever somebody would want to go to hotels or restaurants to eat, there would always be a non-Jew cooking in the kitchen, and they were so mechan the Ramah that the Jew opened the fire. Really, it should be asur, especially according to Dat Maran. Came along Rav Ovadia Yosef in Shirot U'Tshuvot Yehavedat with a monumental heter. Without this heter, basically most Sfaradim all Sfaradim would not be able to eat at all in any restaurants whatsoever. What was this heter? Safek Sefeka. Said that you could make really a double safek. What's the double safek? There's a machloket whether lighting a fire is enough to permit bishul akum. And even if you want to say it's not enough, which is dat maran, ha-Shulchan Aruch, but we have another safek that the Shulchan Aruch brings another machloket, or as the Shach brings this machloket, whether a non-Jew who's a servant in your home is he subject also to the prohibition of bishul akum? Because the whole prohibition of bishul akum is that you might come to marry their daughters, but over here is working for you, so you're not going to come to marry his daughter, correct? So Maran forbids in that area. He says absolutely that's not a heter and it's forbidden. But Rav Ovadia said there are those who are cholek. So put both shitot together and you have sfek sfeka, and you can say safek sfeka neged Maran. And he brought an example from the Chida and from the Rav Pe'alim, who we could say safek sfeka neged Maran. And with this, Rav Ovadia Yosef came with a monumental heter that in a place where it's difficult, one can rely on this sfek sfeka to be matir, to permit anytime a Jew is in a hotel or a restaurant to rely on that the non-Jew is cooking as long as the Jew turn on the fire. Understandably, there was much machloket on this psak. It's a very lenient approach, very lenient psak, especially in light of the fact that Rav Ovadia Yosef goes with Dat Maran in particular. But Rabbi Shalom Misas, in particular, went very strong against this psak. It's known that he was lenient on basar chalak, but regarding to bishul akum, he would never eat out of the house. So meat, he would eat any meat as long as it's glat, as long as it's kasher. But bishul akum he wouldn't touch. And where Rav Ovadia Yosef was more lenient. What was the main ta'ana? What's the main point that Rabbi Shalom has contended? He said you can't say sfek sfeka neged maran over here. You can only say sfek sfeka when it's two different sfikot in different places. Over here, one halacha after the other, Maran says, Bishul akum is asur unless a Jew participates in the fire. And in that prohibition, I'm still not going to permit if there's a shifcha, if it's your worker. It's already a chidush to say that your worker is a shifcha, that's one point. But to say a sfik in the same halacha that Maran said, in this instance is forbidden, we never found that you can make a sfik neged Maran. And even the Chida and the Rav Pe'alim who seem to say that we can make sfikot, that's not talking about in a case where Maran explicitly forbade in both levels. I would add on that it's especially difficult, according to the Shita of Rav Ovadia Yosef that we've spoken in the past, that he understood that the opinion of Maran is like a machriya. The opinion of Maran is like a decider, and it's a hanhaga that we take upon ourselves, that it's like a mara de'atra. That means the other opinions are almost null and void. So how could we take two opinions that Maran says explicitly, I don't follow, and make a sfik out of it? I know that there are some cities in America that rely on this heter to kasher, to let Sfaradim eat in restaurants with no problem. I think that even Rav Ovadia Yosef, it's not so simple what he would say in such an instance. Do we rely on this as a blanket heter or only bishat tahak? Al kol panim, definitely, if one could be machmir and one could raise awareness in the community and pressure that at least even the communities that are overwhelmingly Ashkenazi, but that they know that there is a chumrah and that the mashgiach.
No, okay. So we discussed so far the influence that Rav Ovadia Yosef Shlita had on the world of halacha and on the and certain areas, and especially in Kashrut, where he was able to revolutionize things. And one thing that Rav Ovadia Yosef was a very big proponent of, and he was very well known for, was his opinion on Chalak Bet Yosef. It used to be that Chalak Bet Yosef was extremely hard to find, and nobody really was keeping Chalak Bet Yosef. What is Chalak Bet Yosef? Let's start with explaining what Chalak Bet Yosef is. Chalak Bet Yosef is a standard of kashrut in an animal. As a matter of fact, when you shecht an animal, the only thing that you have to check to make sure that it wasn't tarif are the lungs, because in the lungs it happens to be that's where the most common deficiencies are. There are adhesions. These adhesions are called sirchot. These sirchot have to be carefully removed in order to make sure that there's no hole. Marana Bet Yosef was of the opinion that it's not possible to be able to have that it's not possible if you have sirchot to kasher the animal. He was quoting Chuvot HaRashba that once you have sirchot, once you have these adhesions on the animal, we're not sure at all whether they're good adhesions, not good adhesions. Don't touch the animal. That's the opinion of
these adhesions themselves make the animal tarif,
because the adhesions are a siman that there might be a hole under the adhesion.
So you need to research.
So therefore, you have to. So the Rama says you take off the adhesions, and it depends which adhesions. But on the ones that it's possible to do, you would remove them, and then you would actually, just like a tire, you would blow up the lung, and then you would put it in water, and then you're able to see if it bubbles. If it bubbles, that means that there is a hole, and then the animal is tarif. And that's what many places do. But according to Maran Bet Yosef, once there's an adhesion, you can't touch the animal. Maran says furthermore, if you do peel off these sirchot, it's as if you are feeding trifot to Israel. So this is obviously a very difficult halacha to keep, because most animals indeed have sirchot. So Rav Ovadia started pushing the inyan that we have to have animals that are halak bet Yosef, and the Sfaradim are only able to eat halak bet Yosef. Until Rav Ovadia started speaking about it, it was very, very hard to get. But he revived this inyan in the Teshuvot and Yabi Omer Heleke. He talks about it. He revived the inyan. He would speak about it a lot, and people started being more makbid on halak bet Yosef because of Rav Ovadia. Now, I do want to point out a certain point which is very important. I think that this point is something that people get confused with. Is that when Rav Ovadia said that you should be machmir on halak bet Yosef, nevertheless, we have another halacha that is written that if you find an animal that's shechted in the street, in we'll call it a Jewish neighborhood, you can eat the animal. It wasn't checked or anything, and the lungs are not there anymore. If you find meat in the street that you know is kosher, you're allowed to eat it. It wasn't checked. There's a halacha called rov behemot kshirot. Most animals are kasher. You could rely on the rov behemot kshirot, which means the mitzvah of eating the commandment of eating kosher. It's not that only if it was Chalak Bet Yosef. Chalak Bet Yosef is telling you it's kosher. Now, if you find meat and you don't know if it was kosher, you could rely that most animals are kasher. There's a rule that most animals are kasher. Which Rav Ovadia Yosef applies this principle in Yabia Omer Cheleke to the following. What happens if somebody is at a wedding, or if somebody is at another event and they serve him meat? Can he rely that that meat is kosher? So Rav Ovadia Yosef said that since you could rely on Rov Behemot Kashrut at the end of this Teshuvah in Yibiyom Vercheleke, you could rely on the principle of Rov Behemot Kashrut, and you'd be able to consume the meat. As a matter of fact, today I had the honor of meeting Rabbi Amitai Ben David. He was just here, the author of the Sichat Chulin, one of the world experts in Trefot, and he told me that he heard a similar psak in the name that he spoke to Rabbi Ben Bashaul, Zichar Tzadik Livracha, about, which is the following. And this is a psak that I want to present. Now that Rav Ovadia Yosef pushed very much the inyan of Halak Bet Yosef, we once spoke about what is the Moroccan minhag regarding Halak Bet Yosef, and we mentioned that this was the great machloket between the Megurashim and the Toshavim, the ones who moved into Spain in 1492 after the expulsion. They came with the minhag that they were lenient on sirchot, that any sircha that was stuck to the body of the animal, sircha smucha ladof, and they would smucha ladof, and they would call it. They would be kolef, and then they would check. They wouldn't do Halak Bet Yosef, for sure not. So the question is, nowadays we have the minhag avotenu. We don't have to do Halak Bet Yosef. So in Magen Avot Yoredei, I discussed that it's not so simple to say that, because it could be that they rely on them because they had one animal. So they had to rely on the opinions of Hefsed, of the other opinions. But now that we have so much choice and we're able to get Halak Bet Yosef, everyone would agree that would be the best thing. Nevertheless, if a person is in a meat store, is he allowed to buy the meat that's in front of him? So Rabbi Ben David said in the name of Rabbi Ben Bashaul, and I heard this also in the name of Rabbi Shlomo. I heard this from Rabbi Shlomo Miller over here, a posek in Toronto, that based on the principle that Maran is posek, that ne'evda hare'eya kshera. What's the halacha ne'evda hare'eya kshera? If one has a lung that in an animal that got lost before he had the opportunity to check the lung if it's kosher or not, it got lost. Says Maran, you could rely that the behema was kshira. So over here, since you don't know what happened in the bet shechita, whether the animal was halak bet Yosef or not, it's just coming to the store to you. It's like ne'evda hare'eya kshira. It's as if you don't have that information presented in front of you, and you can rely on the principle of Rav Behemot Kshirot, which would mean, practically speaking, that if a place doesn't do shchita, they don't separate the behemot that are Halak Bet Yosef, and I go to a store and I want to buy the meat, I could rely on the principle. Well, I don't know what it is, and the re'ah is not here. There's no way I could check it. Rav Behemot Kshirot. So he said, Rabbi Ben David, he asked Rabbi Ben Bashaul. Rabbi Ben Bashaul said, from the moment that the shechita place doesn't let you enter, and they don't tell you which animals are Bet Yosef or not, and it's very difficult to be mivared. It's very difficult to find out which animals they did are Chalak Bet Yosef, and they mix them up. You could buy any meat, and you could rely on ne'evda hare'eya kshera, that since the re'ah is not in front of you, it's kasher. And in principle,
so in other words, after the fact,
it would be kosher. And in principle, Rav Ovadia Yosef writes something very similar. He says that if you're at a wedding and the meat is in front of you, it's kasher. When we do mention Chalak Bet Yosef, that we have to push the concept of market, that if a person's in the Bet Shchita and he wants to take an animal, he has to make sure that the animal is, in other words, the standards of what the machshirim are machshir. And Baruch Hashem, because of Rav Ovadia Yosef's consistent derush on this and pushing it, many madbechot, they guarantee everything is Chalak Bet Yosef, and everybody, and a lot of people, and it's said by Chalak Bet Yosef. But if somebody is found in a situation where he doesn't have Chalak Bet Yosef, even according to Rav Ovadia Yosef, he would be permitted to consume the meat. So that's an interesting point. Okay. The other point that Rav Ovadia Yosef, Zecher Tzadik Kadosh Libracha, had tremendous influence on was the wines. And this is not in particular a Sfaradi or Ashkenazi issue. Rav Ovadia Yosef, must be around 40 years ago, came out and said, the wines and the grape juices that you have that are written kasher badat eda charedit, you can make shehakol on it. You can't make a geffen on it. Why? because they mix a lot of water, and they mix more than 50% water. Once you mix more than 50% water, it doesn't have the halacha of wine. And even though Medina de Gemara, as long as it's 1/6 wine, the wine is able to give its flavor and be considered Borei Pri Hagefen, but that's only in those wines. But the wines nowadays are different, and you have to have mostly wines.
This halacha 1/6, it was based on a different quality of wine.
It was based on a different quality of wine. Now, the misconception over here is that Rav Ovadia Yosef was not necessarily speaking about for Sfaradim. If you look closely in his sources, he brings the Pri Megadim, and the Pri Megadim was the one who suggested that the Kaf HaChaim brings this Pri Megadim down also. Rav Ovadia Yosef was speaking in general. The general halacha of Chalak Bet Yosef, of wine. He nowadays the Acharonim say our wines are weaker, and you would need more than 50%. And the type of wines that we have are not that way. Well, ever since he started speaking this way, even the Badat they changed. Originally they said we're only Lemakerot Ashkenazim, and we follow that it's allowed. But slowly everyone started changing. They didn't want to cut off the market that Rav Ovadia Yosef was. People were loyal to him, which was a lot of people in it. He said, as we saw in the Levaya. So they eventually switched it, and now you'll see a lot of Badat's wines. They say kasher gam lefi shitat Marana Bet Yosef, which is not really Marana Bet Yosef. It's really the Acharonim that Rav Ovadia Yosef brought down. But regardless, that you need mostly wine. Now, I have to tell you, in grape juice, there are some shitot that are even more machmir than Rav Ovadia Yosef. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and Rav Eliashiv Zichron Livracha both were of the opinion that by grape juice it has to be 100%. If it's less than 100%, if it's going to be, let's say, 10 or 20% water mixed, it could be you have meishakol. They said they didn't say exact shiur how much, and their svara was like this: that you're able to make a borei pri hagefen on grape juice is already a chidush. If so, we only have what the chidush. The
Can't be even more lenient.
Exactly, you can't be more lenient than that. And the chidush is only that when sochet adam ishkol shenavim umivarech bor pri hagefen. Wine, I understand it's fermented, but grape juice, the way it is, that's bor pri hagefen. Start diluting it even 10 to 20%, it could be shakol. So it's interesting. Rav Ovadia Yosef held 51%. Others held it could be even a sixth. And by grape juice, there are many. The Gedolei Poskim held that it has to be the overwhelming majority grape juice in order for there not to be a problem. So these were three issues. We spoke last time about Bishul Akum and Bishul Israel, and now we spoke about also Chalak Bet Yosef, and also about wine. These were three influences where Ovadia Yosef especially had a tremendous impact on Halacha Bishut of the Bishul Akumi was a little bit more lenient, but he brought up the subject at least that people didn't even know that there was a question. So Bishul Akum by Kashrut, Chalak Bet Yosef, and by wine. These are three psakim in particular that he had tremendous influence on. So this concludes our series of shiurim of the halachic influence of Rav Ovadia on Olam Halacha. Yehi Zichro Baruch.